So at this point, we'd like to open it up to the audience in terms of the more open Q&A. Thanks for all those great comments, Dinesh. So Bernie, what's the first question we have up to bat, either for Dinesh or I to answer, and just let us know who you'd like to comment on.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Cindy and Dinesh. We are open for questions, and we encourage you to type a question into the text box on your webinar control panel. One question which has come forward, this is for Dinesh, is what were the cost savings in hard dollars that you believe you achieved in this program?
So we're a private corporation, so we don't get into the actual hard dollars, but let me give you some sense in terms of ratios. Our sales budget has gone from 15% of revenue down to 10.3% of revenue, and a big part of that is a function of allocating resource towards those opportunities that we can win. So as any sales leader probably knows, the cost of losing is very high. Right? And so your objective is to minimize your cost of losing, and to do that, the best way to do that is to lose early, right? So if you're going to lose early and get opportunities out of the pipeline quickly so your scarce sales resources can focus on the ones that you have the highest probability to win. And so a lot of those savings were the result of our ability to use those multiple data points, including SalesChoice, to triangulate which opportunities we had a low probability of winning and not invest in those. And that translated to you go from 14 and change to 10, and that's roughly a 40% reduction, a third. Yeah.
Okay, this is a question for Dinesh. What is the typical opportunity size in dollars that you typically deal with?
So we have a bimodal distribution. So we have two sets, two kind of peaks to our distribution. The first is around $50,000 to $75,000. It's actually something like 57,000 or 60,000, something like that. I don't remember the exact numbers. And then the second mode is at around $200,000. So depending on which area you're in, you could either end up with opportunities that cluster around 50K or opportunities that cluster around 200K. We do have some business that is quite large in the seven-figure area, but they tend to be outliers to the data set. The keeping the lights, the grind of the business is in those two areas, the 50K and 200K area.
You touched on this, but the question's been framed in a different way. How skilled do you have to be in math or statistics to understand how to use predictive analytics?
I think you need to understand basic math. I think most of the math that I use, I learned in high school. So, as long as you understand the nature of percentages and, how data works at its basic level, so you understand what is statistically significant, and like I said, most of that stuff is stuff that we know and we deal with every day in our businesses. So you don't have to become a data scientist, you don't have to have you don't need to be a mathematician. You need to appreciate what numbers can bring to the table and be willing to work with them. But I think that's nothing new for anybody who's in a sales leadership role. If you've ever worked a commission plan, you can totally handle anything SalesChoice can throw at you.
Right. Some sales leaders feel that they know their business well enough without more technology. And now we're talking about introducing yet another layer of technology with machine learning and artificial intelligence. How are you finding this in terms of, like, if you're skeptical about the machine learning and AI, do you have any comments or thoughts on this for those people who are, a little bit leery of it?
Yeah, be skeptical. That's part of our jobs as business leaders, is to be skeptical. It doesn't mean we don't do anything, though, right? And so what you need to do is you need to be skeptical. You need to run an experiment. You need to test the data, test it against the other data points in your business, and then either A, ground your skepticism with data and figure out what the reality of the situation is. And if it's positive, integrate that tool into your business. And if it's negative, find another tool that will. Right? And I don't think skepticism is in any way a negative thing. It's a natural part of how we make the best possible decisions. The thing is, you don't let your skepticism prevent you from acting.
Great, thank you. Another question, this is for Cindy. Can you confirm that the minimum number of win-lost opportunities is 1,500? What kind of other data should accompany the win-lost opportunity data?
We need a minimal of 1,500 historical wins and losses. So if we've got that, then there's typically a good baseline. Any less, the science isn't too interesting. Obviously, the more data sets, the merrier. So at this point, we integrate, analyze everything in the opportunity object, everything that's in the account object, and we also have the ability to take in other object data. We just launched this solution and we've just come out of beta, so it's still fairly new. We just recently integrated 5,000 external databases and other capability, so things that are surging real time on the web, and then in terms of B2B keywords and then correlating that into sales coverage opens up some really interesting real-time opportunities, and even on the sales messaging, so that whole external signal thruster, I call that, is now starting to augment the solution. So we don't need a ton of data. Typically, we look for at least 15 sales reps. In Dinesh's case, they had 7 years of historical data, so there are exceptions. We don't need 100% clean data. I think that's impossible with sales professionals, but certainly we look for at least 60% of the data set being clean. The statistical engine doesn't ingest data that's not accurate. So it's relatively a smooth process. We just have to qualify, like everybody else, the relevancy and also what problem you're trying to solve.
Another question, two in fact. So the first is, what types of fields about win-loss do you need to have to get meaningful output with the tool?
Well, typically, if you're using the opportunity object today, obviously there's an inherent set of fields that are in there that are defined by SalesForce. So like your estimated close date, you're setting up your sales gates, you're putting in those percentages that you believe are relevant for your unique sales process. The interesting thing is we ignore your static sales gates because it's mathematically flawed. And so just as an example, you may say that a proposal cycle in your forecast, if it's 50%, and you're halfway through and you put a proposal in, but there's a big difference between historical share a wallet where you've done, you've been successful consistently selling into a particular account. Maybe your win rate's been close to 85-90%. So our science will pick up historical patterns. Kind of gets to the point Dinesh was talking about share a wallet. So we, unlike some companies that do predictive analytics, and there are other players out there, there aren't that many, mind you, probably can count them on my 10 fingers. We pick up all of the data points, all of the fields that are either native in SalesForce or custom fields. A lot of the other ones just pick up a subset. So our science is far more rigorous. We also analyze all the notes for positive or negative sentiment. That's correlated into the algorithm, as well as some other methods that are very advanced. So that's why we're getting to 85% accuracy. There have been accounts we've been in. We just finished a major pilot in a major global telecom. And just to give you a sense of, we can go small business or we can scale as well. In their case, they weren't keeping specific fields that we knew were of statistical relevance in their particular industry. So sometimes we will find things that's not in their fields and we'll make recommendations. I think every day we're learning too.
Okay, great. Along that line as well, again for Cindy, can you define clean data?
When you look at the opportunity object in particular, you will have set your own life cycle pattern, and what I mean by that is have at least 60% accurate data with your sales reps, and as they're putting in their information. If 80% of your data in salesforce.com, quite frankly, is crap, obviously you're not going to have, probably not going to be a candidate for predictive analytics. You have to have a foundation. My point is that we'll never get to every single field being accounted for. What we do need is to make sure there's statistical relevance. So there's usually, often 15 or 20 fields that are really critical to have clean data. As we all know, there's lots of bells and whistles that are in salesforce.com that don't necessarily drive the statistical pattern. But we never really know what we don't know until we honestly get into account, because we're one of the few players that every company has its own unique predictive analytic and machine learning model rather than a pre-canned. So, and what's nice is that once we're plugged in, the science immediately goes into creating your own unique business model, and that's a differentiator for us.